Fleeing famine and poverty in their homeland, tens of thousands of Chinese migrants travelled to Australia in the 1850s, bound for the Victorian goldfields. Unsurprisingly, this was met with growing racial tensions that escalated into violence towards the migrants. So the Victorian government responded by implementing a £10 tax per person arriving at its ports. To skirt this, ship captains decided the best docking point was the small port of Robe, close to the South Australian and Victorian border, where the Chinese gold miners would walk the almost 500-kilometre trek, which obviously wouldn't follow the modern roads of today. The journey was arduous, and many of the migrants suffered ill health, while others died along the way. Interestingly, they used to pass through this small town of Penola, and consequently the locals named one of their streets Chinamans Lane. And now, 150-odd years later, the lane is in the news again. Why? I'm sure you can guess. That's right, because it's missing an apostrophe. Or is it meant to be Chinamans? Either way, I just can't stand bad grammar. No, but seriously, the reason the lane is in the news is because some people are calling the street name racist, and it probably doesn't help that it excludes Chinese women. Penola resident calls Chinamans Lane offensive and council votes. Apparently, a new resident of Chinamans Lane asked for the name of the road to be changed, writing to the council, "We live on Chinamans Lane. I'm hopeful the council will consider updating this offensive street name." A couple of issues here. Firstly, a single person wishing to change the name of their street means they would be forcing everyone else to suffer the practical consequences of such a change, such as updating their address and banking details, maps and directories, legal documentation that references the old name, and so on. Secondly, is Chinaman even used anymore, derogatory or otherwise? I would argue it's not used at all in any sense of the word, apart from the old historic signage as we've seen in this case. Contrast the N-word, for example. Obviously, it's considered very offensive, but it's still used, especially in modern rap music and so on. Should white Australian fans rap along to the N-word at a Kendrick Lamar concert? Well, should black Australians be allowed to rap along with the N-word? If we start saying only people of certain skin colours are allowed to say certain words, then I'm sorry, we're a long way away from solving racism. Obviously, we still use words like Englishman, Irishman, Frenchman, and so on, and they're completely fine. German? No, wait, scratch that. But it seems like the word Chinaman, because of its historical connotations, is considered offensive. Although they mark it as dated, actually I would classify the word Chinaman as obsolete. The last time I heard it was on Seinfeld in an episode from 1997, where Elaine and Morty are talking about buying silk. Elaine says, "Well, we could fly some fabric in from our silk factories for about $1,000 a bolt." Then a shocked Morty says, "1,000? I know a couple of Chinamen over there on 43rd Street who'll do it for half that." Then Elaine corrects him and says, "It's, Asian Americans." So even back then, using the word Chinaman was considered offensive and dated. I've not heard this word again since, except interestingly, in the cricket, where it refers to a type of left-arm unorthodox spin bowling, although at around the time of BLM, that term has fallen out of favour, as has the word batsman, surprisingly. How dare we call a male batsman a man? Actually, according to dictionary.com, although they label the term offensive, they also note that historically, Chinaman was a neutral compound word, similar to Irishman or Englishman, so its original intent wasn't to be a racist word. It's just that it's become offensive over time. Personally, I would argue that the word Asian can be used in a pejorative way. For example, if somebody said, "A bunch of Asians just moved in down the street," does that mean we should cancel the term Asian because some people use it offensively? What about the word cow? There's some cows in the meadow. Fine, but "my new teacher is a real cow." No, that's offensive. We should cancel the word. I'd argue that almost any word can be used to cause offence. Unfortunately, certain members of our society hold this mistaken belief that if we can just erase all these racist words, then we'll erase racism. Obviously, that's a very naive belief. Racism is an attitude. It doesn't exist because of words. Erasing historically racist terms will not erase racism. What about Chinatown? Is that not offensive? A single part of the city designated to Chinese people? Actually, I know Chinese people, my wife is Chinese, and they love Chinatown. And they find all this news about Australians becoming offended by street names very amusing. My wife simply said, "Haven't Australians got anything better to do?" No, apparently we don't. Obviously, there's dozens of place names in Australia that use the term Chinaman, so it would be an absolute logistical nightmare updating them all. Thankfully, common sense has prevailed, with the South Australian Council voting to retain the offensive name of Chinamans Lane. Councillors voted 11-0 to keep the street name at a council meeting. Mayor Des Knoll said it was retained unanimously and it's just part of that Penola history and we need to retain that history within our community. Yep, I agree with the Mayor. Nobody's going around using the name in a bad way. We should be learning from the past, not erasing it.